Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Cucina Aurora Kitchen Witchery podcast. It's me, Dawn, the Kitchen Witch, and today I am so excited to welcome Nancy Hendrickson to the show. Nancy is the author of Ancestral Tarot and the upcoming Ancestral Grimoire, which will be released this September. She's currently working on a Day of the Dead oracle, and Nancy has worked with the ancestors since childhood and has been reading tarot for more than 30 years. Wow. I think you've got some
Yeah,
stories, Nancy. I can't
I
wait to
do.
hear them. Welcome
I
to the
have stories.
show.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I'm
And
so
it's so,
excited.
I do have to tell you, when I told my sister about being on this podcast, she said, "Could they get anybody worse in the kitchen than you?" It's like, thanks so much, sis. So I actually can do cooking stuff, but it was kind of funny.
Oh, that's pretty fun. Well, it's funny because I think people assume that because I'm a kitchen witch and it's, my podcast that we have to talk about cooking, and we always wind up somewhere in a conversation. There's always going to be a conversation about food at some point
Oh,
because we
cool.
all eat, right? But this whole thing is I want to learn about what other people do, you know? Because I mean, I guess cooking is and kitchen witchery is so much, there is so much ancestral magic in it, at least for me,
Absolutely.
right? At least for me. So
Yeah.
um I'm excited to kind of see where our worlds blend. Yeah, dovetail,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah, totally.
It's super exciting. It's super exciting. So thanks for being
Oh,
here.
yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for the invite.
I'm
Uh,
excited. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about you because we've never met before. So I
No.
don't know anything about you personally. So
Well, okay. What do you wanna know? I am an open book. What you see is what you get, so
I love it.
fire
I love
away.
it. So I know that you say in your bio that you've been working with ancestors, and there was something that was in one of your bios that I was reading when I was researching you, that you've been looking for the dead your whole life,
I have been.
right? So I want to know, like,
I have been.
let's start at the beginning. Like, what at what point in your life did you start either working with the dead or noticing, like, when I speak to other people that have that gift of mediumship and working with the dead, they say that it just happened when they were young and they just knew that they were connected to that world. Tell us
Yeah.
a little bit about that experience for you.
For me, I grew up in a family that always told family stories. So I had 2 grandmothers whose own memory went back so far. And so I grew up hearing all about the ancestors. And I literally I was 8 years old when this all started. And so if you're hearing the audio, you can't see that my hair is totally white by now. So I'm way, way past 8 years old. But I was aware that there was this world beyond this world. And I always want those people, the dead people, have always been as real to me as you are,
Mm.
or as anybody else in our world is. And so, and part of it is pre or by the time I was 15, I'd gone through the deaths of my grandmother, my grandfather, a brother, a cousin, my dad. So being around the dead was normal for me. And the good thing about it is I learned to lose that fear of the dead or the
Mm.
fear of dying because it was so much a part of my everyday life by the time I hit 15.
Sure.
So, yeah, so I think that was really kind of the impetus for me. And so then I remember really well, after my dad died when I was 15, I was when I got a driver's license at 16, I remember going to the cemetery and I'd see these headstones and I was like, oh, okay, I know about you. And so I could start hearing people wanting to tell their stories to me.
Wow. So you're like 15 years old, 16 years old, and you're in that cemetery and you're
Yeah.
like already like, oh, there's the gravestone of Joe Smith. And you're
Yeah.
like, oh, hey Joe, how's it going? Like,
Kind of, yeah. And again, I think it's just because I grew up in a family that was very connected to their own history, and I had so many people die
Mm.
when I was very young. So
Yeah.
I think that that was part of it.
Well, sure, because you're the rest of us, there's always that fear that when people die and it brings up your own mortality, and keeping ancestors alive through storytelling kind of brings them into the world, right? Makes them more real instead of like, oh,
Totally.
well, we're just so sad about how, Auntie Joan died. So we don't want to talk about how Auntie Joan died.
I
At least
know,
that's the way it
that's
was in
true.
my family, right?
Well, I didn't live during this era, but before, way before my era, when people died, they laid them out in the living room and the family took care of them and washed them and put their clothes on.
Hmm.
And I think divorcing us from death
Mm.
by making everything so sterile makes death so, oh my God, it's so fucking scary. It is
Yes,
just so scary. And, I had the incredible privilege of sitting with one of my aunts and one of my best friends as they were passing. And it's like the greatest gift in the world that you can sit there with someone, hold their hand, and wish them a wonderful journey.
I
And
agree. I agree.
we have just our culture has divorced us from death because we're so afraid of it.
Yeah,
So,
and not just death, but leading up to death, aging, right? Everything is about be young and use especially for women, right? Like use this
uh,
face cream to look younger and then all these things, and you're like, maybe I'm cool with getting older. Maybe death doesn't. I mean, no one wants to think about death, but by the same token, like you said, it's death is as part of life as being born is. We all are born and we are all going to die at some point, and it doesn't have to be frightening when you put it in those terms, right?
I I just read this wonderful quote by a Chilean poet, and I'm not gonna say the Spanish because my Spanish is so bad, but it is, "Death is democratic." It takes us all, death is
Wow.
democratic. So, uh,
Wow, what a cool way of thinking about it. I also had the privilege of holding my father's hand as he left this world, and I mean, listen, let's be realistic. It's not easy, no matter how cool you are or how much you feel like okay with death
right.
or accept it. It's not easy or pleasant by
No,
any stretch of the imagination to lose someone that you love, and to go through
absolutely.
the trauma of that. But when I often think about losing my dad, I'm drawn to that moment of gratitude in being able to hold his hand and help him be kind of like the steward of his
That's right.
passing, you
A
know?
and it gives you there's a real peace at the middle of it that
Mhm,
it's horrible. We hate losing people we love, but
mhm,
that moment of transition is so peaceful,
mhm,
generally speaking. So,
mhm. Even when
yeah,
someone is in pain, the
well, because
moment of passing
yeah,
is there is a peace in it when there is a letting go and
yeah,
a surrender. That death sucks for the living. It doesn't suck for the person who's left.
I know.
They're good. they're
Yeah,
all
they are good. And,
they're good.
I think another layer on top of that is I've been so aware of other lives that I have led. So, I know that once I go, I'll figure out what I learn, and I'll figure out what I need to learn, and I'll probably come back again,
Yeah.
you know? So I think there's that layer, and I don't know if it's past lives, concurrent lives, alternative realities, other dimensions. I don't know how that actually works.
Mhm.
I just know I've been to places that I know, oh, I died there. Yeah, I know that place.
Wow. Wow. So I want to get back a little bit to your growing up and
Oh, okay.
being surrounded by elders who were sharing with you ancestral stories,
Yeah.
and how that kind of taught you the stories of your own heritage, and then how did that affect the way you see other people and learning about their heritage?
That's a great question. And I am really lucky because I didn't know this till I was an adult, but my grandparents went to seances. I didn't know that
Oh, that's
until
so
I was
cool.
probably in my 30s, and my aunt told me about it, and, I have here's what they did. They had 2 little chalkboards, and they put chalk in between, covered them, and let spirit write. So I've got the last writings on those. I've got those chalkboards in my closet, and something, hello from Uncle Steve, and there's a picture of a Native American somebody drew in chalk. It's really so I didn't know this. So then I think,
Wow.
oh my gosh, do we inherit? Is that part of our DNA?
Right.
And which is actually what Ancestral Grimoire is based on, is that I think we do inherit these magical things. So, and my mother was so tapped into her past lives, and about a month before she passed, and thank God she lived till she was 95, was really healthy. A month before she died, she said, "Okay, I know where my next life's gonna be. I'm gonna be in a cottage in England by the ocean." And I mean,
Oh,
she had it all plotted out
wow.
because she was aware of her past lives. So, I think I was lucky that I grew up with a family that was so open to the other
Yes.
world, because I know a
Yes.
lot of people kind of get hammered for it,
Yeah.
and I did
Yeah.
not. So my mom always encouraged me in tarot or meditation or healing, anything I wanted to do, because that was so familiar to her. So
Wow.
I was lucky. Also, the other thing too, that just circling back to your question, once I did DNA, I did, because I've written about genealogy and family stuff
Mhm.
so many years. I've taken like 5 or 6 different DNA tests, so I can see that if we go way, way, way back, I've got part of Mexican, Chilean, Eastern Asia. I have got a whole bunch of very ancient DNA from places you wouldn't think, versus my modern DNA, which is very Western European and
Right.
Scandinavian. So, but if you know that about yourself and know that we all came out of Africa, I mean,
Mhm.
it has been proven we all came out of Africa.
Mhm.
And, our skin colors changed because we had to protect. If we were below the equator, we needed darker skin to protect us.
Mhm.
If we were in Iceland, we didn't. So,
Mhm.
people don't understand that under the skin, we are the same people.
100%.
Yeah. So
100%.
that's one of my little soapboxes that I get on once in a while. But
Oh God, yeah. And there's a few years ago it was circulating on the internet and it was like um x-rays. It was like there were people standing behind x-ray machines in a crowd and it was like,
oh,
okay, pick out the skeleton that is the Eastern European person, pick out the skeleton that is the African American person. And of course no one could do it because we're all the damn same. Like it's
yeah, exactly.
we're all the same. We have different life experiences, but at our core being, as individuals we're different, but as a species we're the same.
I understand that, because when you are a different race, you do see the world through a different set of eyes, and
Absolutely.
because of experience, and sadly our culture is, and I can't, okay, I'm just gonna have to say the
Just
whole
say it. Just
Roe
say it.
versus Wade thing. I'm
Just
just
say it
gonna have
because
to
that's
go
happening right now as
I'm
we're
just gonna have to go
recording this.
political. And so can I just take it like a tiny sidebar and just,
Yes.
okay.
Yes. Do it.
Once you start losing one personal freedom,
Mhm.
you are going to lose more and more and more. So if a woman says, "I'm not gonna have sex anymore," then does that mean that rape is no longer illegal? Because after all, does it mean spousal abuse is no longer illegal?
Mhm.
People need to understand one personal freedom equals all personal freedom. So anyway, I'll
Mhm.
get down off that soapbox, but I couldn't let it go.
No, no, no. And you're 100% right. And I don't think that we can really dive into things like ancestral magics
Yes.
until we look at where we are today because where we are is a direct result of where we came from, and where we're going is a direct result of where we are. So at the
Yeah.
time of recording of this podcast, because this isn't going to air until September, at the time of recording of this podcast, there is a very big hubbub that Roe versus Wade is going to be overturned, and reproductive freedoms are going to be completely taken away. And it feels like the first domino is falling, because it's about, I'm sorry, women's rights are human rights. And when you start othering each other, as in women are other, LGBTQ are other, people of color are other, and we start taking the humanity out of humans and taking away rights, everything falls to shit. And I feel like we're right there, really,
We are
really right
right
there,
there. We are
right?
right there.
And our ancestors who fought so hard, especially, again, topically, because it is what's going on in the world at this moment, like our grandmothers are going, why the hell did we work so hard to make sure that you guys could vote? Why the hell did we work so
I
hard
know.
to make sure these laws were passed to keep you safe, to keep us safe? They did that work. Our ancestors did that work for us. So now what the hell are we going to do? Because we're going to be the ancestors someday.
Yeah, we are going to be the ancestors. And, women need to realize the incredible power they hold, because women do make the world go round, people, no matter what you think. Women are really strong.
Mm-hmm.
And, women in families make money decisions. They have a lot of power about where the dollar goes. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that this will probably get clipped from the audio, but I mean, there is a Mother's Day strike planned for Sunday. That don't go give restaurants your money. Don't give florists your money. You know, make the dollar, speak
Make it
for you.
matter.
Yeah.
Vote with your money.
Vote
Yeah.
with your money. Yeah.
Vote with your money.
Yeah,
Right.
so of course, see, once we start talking, we can go so far afield
I know.
of ancestral work, but that's okay.
I know. But it's not far from ancestral work,
No, it really
because
isn't.
it is, like we said, we are going to be the ancestors someday. So, perhaps years ago, two women sat down and were having a conversation about tarot, and they were like, we need to vote, fight for the vote. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
they might have been having that conversation. These are important things as we walk through the world as witches or as spiritual practitioners, that these are really important to the work we do on a daily basis. Even though you work with the dead and things that are past, you are a direct result of what was in the past,
Yeah,
in the
absolutely.
present, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, and to bring it back, because women are so important, the very beginning of this conversation, you said you had two grandmothers who told you the stories of your families. You
Yeah.
didn't say you had two uncles. You didn't say you had two brothers. You didn't say
No.
you had two grandfathers. It
Two
is the
grandmothers.
women who pass the stories down.
Yeah, they do. They are the storytellers. They're the story keepers. And, again, it is the women, and it's interesting. And if you trace your family tree, it's very hard to find the women, because they took their husband's name.
Mhm.
So if you go back 150 years, it's really starts getting hard to find the women, and yet they're the ones that created you. I mean, totally.
Yeah. Yeah, they are the ones that created you. So on that thread, um, I have been recently made aware of, and not even recently, in the last 10 years or so, the principle concept of generational cell memory, right?
Okay.
So that physical ailment could be carried in the cell memory from mother to daughter, from daughter to daughter, right? So specifically, if we were talking about sexual abuse and it happened maybe 3 generations before, but every woman since then has had some reproductive issues, right?
Totally agree.
Endometriosis or something like that, in terms of the cell memory, physical manifestations of that trauma that happened generations before. If that's true, which I believe it to be, but I'm no scientist, right? I believe it to be in theory from my own personal experiences. If that's true, then that stands to reason that we have emotional and spiritual traumas come down through us generationally as well, right?
Totally. I totally agree.
How, in your opinion, as the expert that I'm talking to on this subject matter, does someone like me who maybe has emotional trauma from ancestors or immediate family, or even the two generations previous, how do I or someone like me work this kind of magic, work this
Yeah.
kind of spiritual working?
And I think that is a great question. And I actually have an example for you from just me is, I told you I was 15. My dad died. I was with him. It was
Mm.
horrifying. It was everything horrible you can imagine. And and just recently, it crossed my mind, "Oh my god, my grandmother found her father in the field." She was horrified. So I thought, "Oh god, this stops with me. This stops with me."
Wow.
So what I started doing, and this is a really recent realization, what I started doing is working with tarot because that is my main spiritual healing gift. I've been working with tarot to tap in with other ancestors. So I will draw some court cards, which if people don't know tarot, it's the page, knight, queens, and kings. And I will work with that and with my pendulum to find an ancestor who can help me break that pattern. And then I'll draw cards saying, okay, if I do this, then it can help me break the pattern because I don't want anybody else in my family to have to go through that.
Mm.
And so whether it's that emotional trauma or a physical, like you're talking about, and like endometriosis or whatever your problems are,
Mhm.
I use tarot because that is my gift, is tarot.
So you
So
can, you feel that you can clear that generational
I do,
emotional trauma.
I do. I do because I work with the ancestors a lot. So I will draw cards. I'll ask, okay, I need an ancestor who can help me be the end of the line of this finding the dead
Yes.
father.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
I will draw a card. I will use my pendulum to ask, did I know you? Did you live in the 19th century? Did you live in the 18th century? So I use my pendulum to put them in a time and place.
Mhm.
And then I will draw, and I don't know if people listening are really into tarot, but I hope you are. I
We
will
have
draw,
quite a few. Yeah.
okay, I will draw a major arcana card saying, tell me the core of your life. So were you a creator? Were you a hard worker? Tell me the core of your life. Then we'll start drawing cards together to show me what's the first step I can take. Okay, what's the next step I can take? That's what I do.
This is
Is
really important, Nancy, because for someone like myself, and I would guess there's just as many people out there who have had experience like this as you have, experience of being connected to family. A lot of people that I know have estrangement in family, right?
very much
Or grew up without knowing the generation before their parent, right? They might know their grandparent, but they probably don't know the person
right.
before that. So, for example, my my family tree, I guess, if you were, lack of a better term,
Okay.
um, we were estranged from my father's family for most of my life until he passed. So I didn't really know them. So I to this day I really don't know where they come from. I've done a little bit of ancestry work, just like 23andMe kind of thing, just to see
Right.
where the families come from. But on my mother's side, my grandmother, on my mom's side, she's the only grandmother I really had a relationship with. And she came from Italy when she was like 6 or 7. She would never, ever talk about her experiences. It was very traumatic coming over on the boat. She was very, very traumatized by that. So she never talked about it. The family decided when they moved here in the 1920s, we're we're not going to speak Italian anymore, we're only going to speak English. So
Right.
they lost a lot of the heritage, right? And so it's refreshing for me to hear you say that through your work with tarot, you're asking, who are you? Who is this ancestor? Where
Right.
would I have known you? Can you talk a little bit more about how someone like me who has a chasm doesn't know anything about, those generations?
Sure.
How would I find them?
Okay. And let me say this too. You're right. Most people I run into may know their grandparents, probably don't even know their grandmother's maiden name.
Mhm.
Okay. So that's just a given.
Mhm.
However, what I do always say is your ancestors know you.
Mm.
Even if you don't know them, they are very well aware of who you are.
I love that.
They do know who you are. So if you use, I love using pendulum a lot. And let's say you know your family's from Italy, but maybe that's all you know. Okay. If you have an iPad or a tablet or anything, here's what I do. I pull up a map of Italy. I use my pendulum to let it lead me to where that family came from.
Wow.
And it works so easily because pendulums are pulled to they follow the energy. And so
Wow.
that's the metaphysical method. Okay. The non-metaphysical method is you go to the Ellis Island website, find your grandmother, and on the ship's manifest, it tells where
Mhm.
they started their journey.
Mhm.
So you have two ways to do it.
Yeah.
I like doing the map way myself with the pendulum. And if you don't know where the country is, I get a world map, do the same thing. I hold my pendulum over each continent.
Wow.
And so I know which continent. Okay, so I need to start in South America. Okay, South America map. I do it again. It can be kind of tedious, but I get such great information.
Mhm.
So that's what
Mhm.
I would do. And if people are not tarot or pendulum people, you have magical skills,
Mm.
you know.
Yes.
A-
Yes, 100%.
Ask, ask,
Ask.
do candle work, do candle magic.
Mhm.
I mean, when I started writing Ancestral Grimoire, the one that comes out in September, I realized that I think science one day is going to understand that encoded in our DNA are certain magical skills. And I just think we don't know science well enough today to
Mhm.
know that. So I
Mhm.
do talk about working with the spirit of the land. So where are you located? Where?
So I'm up here in New Hampshire, actually.
Okay. So let's say you're sitting in New Hampshire and you, by a pendulum or a ship's manifest, find out where grandma came from. You in New Hampshire can start working with the spirits of the land where grandma came from.
Mhm.
And you can, by doing that, you can understand what happened there. And
Mm.
you can get a sense of maybe why she didn't talk about stuff.
Right.
So,
Right.
so we have so many tools as magical people.
Mhm.
We just need to put them to use in a different way in our head.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things that I do as a kitchen witch, and I think it's a really, and I love your opinion on it because, you know, I do my own ancestral work is really just kitchen magic, right? But I
Okay.
think it's a really potent way of connecting with ancestors. Tell if you want to know a people or where you're from, find out what the earth is providing there
Right.
at any
Right.
given time of the year and find out what they eat and why they eat it, what grows, what the earth gives, why is this soil so good for this and not that, and learn about the food and how the body was nurtured back when that ancestor was alive, right? So
Yeah,
for
absolutely.
so for me, like, and I think a lot of people will things that get lost, right? People might not tell stories, but they'll share a recipe, right?
Wow.
So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
right. That recipe gets handed down, handed down, handed down. Did you have any of that kind of ancestral magic growing up or now?
I do because one of my cousins actually put together a cookbook of all of the family recipes. And
Oh,
it was four sides of a family, mom, dad grandparents. And so I can go in and say, oh yeah, I remember that thing she used to make. So I can go get the recipe and make it. So,
And I bet you do it great. So the beginning of
I
this conversation, you said you weren't a good cook, but I bet you
I
those recipes come out
they're good.
fantastic.
And I actually can cook. I have had this conversation lately. I can cook. It's just not it's not my best talent. Let's say that. Although I will tell you, last night I was teaching my lover how to make shrimp étouffée. So that's magic for me.
That is magic. Shrimp
Yeah,
étouffée is definitely
it's
magic.
magic. Yeah, it totally is.
Is that one of your family recipes, or is that just something you love?
No, it's something I loved and I love making it.
Yeah.
And she loves eating it. So I love showing her how to make it.
Oh, that's so sweet. See, and that's how you share that
Yeah.
magic. I think that's what is so potent about food as ancestral magic, is being able to share it with someone who maybe is outside of your family, or to make it for people that maybe they were also connected to that person, right? So
Yeah.
my grandmother had this bread and we just called it grandma bread. Like there's no other, there's no, and I mean, I write cookbooks and I don't think I've ever put this one in writing. I don't think I ever will, because it's that kind of sacred, you know.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
and everybody in the family has tried to figure it out. And somehow or another, I got, because, she's a little Italian grandma. She never wrote anything down. So we don't know how much of this or how much of that, there's no measurements on any of
Yeah.
her recipes. But I did get like a little scrap of paper after she passed away that said like bread recipe. And then it was like spinach and garlic and this and that. And I tried it and tried it and tried it until I got it right. And so now I'm the only one that knows how to make that. Um, and that's a gift for me, because that's how I keep her with me at all
Well,
times.
and you've made the food sacred. So as you eat that bread, grandma's
Mhm.
bread, there is this sense of the sacred coming from the beloved dead
Yes.
to you. And to me, that's so powerful because then you get to have part of grandma
Mhm.
inside your heart,
Mhm.
which is just amazing. I have to tell you, I talked to a friend of mine whose grandma was from Italy, and she said kind of the same thing. Grandma never had measurements, but while she was stirring the pot, under her breath, she was saying like a spell, something like that.
For sure.
And so I thought, oh, that's so cool. I never
Yes.
experienced that with mine, but I wondered if you ever did it with yours.
So she not so my grandmother was very, very Catholic. I mean, we grew up very Roman Catholic, Italian, New York Catholic, 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 all the guilt, everything, you know.
Okay.
And but she was always calling to the Blessed Mother. She was always calling to the Virgin Mary. So for her, that was, I feel like she was more connected with the female,
Okay.
religious icon than she was with, maybe the image of Jesus Christ or something like that. But I say all the time, she was a kitchen witch. I mean, grandma had a recipe for everything. And every time she put something on the table and you'd say, oh, grandma, this is really good, she would say, there's all good ingredients in there. There's all good ingredients in there.
Oh, wow.
That was always what she used to say. And how she defined her cooking was, there's all good ingredients in there.
I
You know,
love
so
that.
so you knew she wasn't faking anything, I mean, I have vivid memories. I was just talking to someone else on the podcast who we were talking about eating weeds and eating like foraging. And I was telling her about how I have vivid memories of going to my grandmother's house as a kid. Um, and we would go out into the backyard and pick dandelions and chop up the dandelions for dandelion omelet. Um, and that was a big deal. If grandma was going to make you dandelion omelet, it was a big deal,
Wow.
because there were like 10 of the grandkids. And that was, you would get to go to grandma's house by yourself. And you would go out in the yard and you'd pick the dandelions. It was a big deal. So there were these rituals around food and rituals around cooking that weren't just about the big holidays or somebody's birthday. Um, did she mumble under her breath while cooking? Yes. But it was more like probably a prayer, or
Okay.
she would I don't have any memories of things she might say, with the exception of that there's good ingredients in here. Um, but that's really the only thing, like when I think about ancestral magic, it's difficult to identify anything except food related things. So I find it really interesting that your practice is so working with the ancestors is storytelling and connecting with their homeland, basically.
Right.
Um, I think that's just so. What is it that drew you to that kind of work in the first place? You could have been exposed to all of these stories, and you still could have been like, "That's nice," but what drew you?
Yeah.
Why?
No, because this is the total truth. When I was really little, I wanted to be an archaeologist
I
because
love it.
the idea of digging into things that grabbed me. And so I realized in all these years I've been working with the ancestors, that's exactly what I do. I never cared about, oh, great grandma was born this date, died that date. I don't care. I want to know the stories.
Mm,
I want to know the stories because you know what? The stories made me, you know, I
mhm.
am part of the stories. And so the more I could understand the stories, the more I could know me.
Is there a
As
particular story that stands out that
you know,
you
yeah,
could
I will tell you one
pinpoint?
thing. Yeah, well, there are many, but one that comes to mind is I've always said that when things get really hard, my tendency is just to pull myself back up and say, I'm really strong. I've got all these female ancestors behind me.
Mhm,
And so the one that comes to mind, I had a great aunt who whose husband died in a hunting accident. And I read the obituary, and all 5 of her children were home with the measles. Her husband is dead. A son dies in World War II, a son dies in a car wreck, a
mm.
son gets arrested, and yet the only memory I have of her is her laughter, that no matter what happened, she always managed to go inside and pull out this very joyous, I'm alive person. And so, I think of my aunt, my great aunt, when things are bad, I think, "Oh, man, she went through all that shit. Man, I can go through this."
Mhm,
And so it gives you an incredible strength, I think.
mhm. Yeah, because you can identify this isn't a random person. This is
Right,
someone who shares your bloodline,
right,
right?
absolutely.
So there's a bit of her in you, and you're able to say, "Let me take Auntie's joy
Yeah.
and bring that out because it's in me because she's in my line," right?
She is my line. And, because I do love research, I have been fortunate that I can go back and find a lot of stories in, a couple hundred years ago. And that's just because I happen to like to research. And I think people don't realize that if, especially, well, your family came to America probably later, and your grandmother, so turn of the century, my guess,
1920s,
yeah.
1920s.
Yeah, it was called the Great Wave of Immigration.
Yep.
That was a huge wave. Okay.
Yep.
So, but if your family was here early 1800s, let's say, there are almost every county in America did history books of the founding of, and so if you can get your hands on a history book of the county where your family lived, it's a good chance you're going to find stories about them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how I can find out, oh, so and so had the first cabin with a wooden floor, and so had a bar, and so did this and this. And so I'm lucky that I know that stuff. But
So cool.
even if I didn't, tarot and the pendulum, they kind of get me to the same place.
It's really, really fascinating to hear you speak about your connections with your ancestors. Um, I love this, this aunt that you have that you could just pull out that
Yeah.
joy and all of that. I mean, that's beautiful. How does one who maybe has family trauma, like you have no relationship with your family, you're ashamed of them, you would not choose them to hang it, like you wouldn't trust them in a room alone with your
Right.
purse, right? I don't want to be around not me, but like a person
Yeah.
who doesn't want to be around their family because they are not good people and do have that estrangement. How does one get past and find those bits of joy and what can be connected to from an ancestor that you didn't know. So we've established you can find that ancestor that you didn't know.
Right.
But how do you pull out that strength or that joy or that courage when there's so much hurt around traditional blood family of
Yeah.
origin, if you would say?
Yeah. And I would say most of the people I work with fall in that category,
Mm.
that they are totally estranged from family. They were abused either emotionally or physically, or they were ignored. They weren't clothed and fed as they should have been. They had
Mm.
all these unwritten rules that they never knew when they were going to get in trouble for something.
Mm.
And that happens to be the category I work with the most.
Wow.
And so what the biggest thing that I try and talk to them about, and we do cards because I always use cards, is forget that family you knew,
Mm.
because I guarantee you, you are surrounded by ancestors who truly love you. And if you can, it is not in my nature to sit up here and push books I've written. I
Yeah,
will
but it's
tell
really good.
I will thank you. I will tell you that I've had a lot Ancestral Tarot. Yeah, I've had lots of emails from people who've actually worked through the book, and they have said it's the first time I've actually felt like I had this connection that I wanted. I wanted this connection.
Right, right. That's
Be-
that key element there, right?
It is a
Because
key element.
even that word family, to be perfectly honest, the word family for me carries weight and obligation that I'm not comfortable with.
Yeah, it's a trigger.
It's a trigger word for a
It's a
lot
total
of
trigger.
people.
Yeah, and I don't know your age, but I will just say that Instagram, which is where I am most active, I know that the bulk of people that I deal with on Instagram are 30s. I'll
Yeah,
just
they're
say gen
young. They're young.
30s, because they have such terrible experiences with family. And they either have family who were very abusive, or they have family who were the helicopter parents and they never learned how to be independent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the world is a big, scary place to them. And, Dawn, I mean, what I can provide is I came to tarot as a healer. Now, I did healing way before I got into tarot. And so I try through tarot to help heal the people
Those
who come to me.
chasms.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Those wounds, and I think that's a really good point about ancestral magic and that how ancestral magic can heal the wounds caused by maybe your immediate family of origin,
Right.
right? So
Right.
let's come back to that. Let's take a quick break and let's come back to that idea after the break, and we'll talk about that, and then we're going to talk about your new book, The Ancestral Grimoire, because that's super fascinating. So we'll be right back with the
Cool.
fabulous Nancy
Thank you.
Hendrickson. We'll be right back. And we are back with the amazing Nancy Hendrickson talking ancestral magic and ancestral trauma and how to get past it and tarot. And this is just really eye opening because this isn't the kind of work that I personally do. So it's really eye opening. So before the break, we were talking about how ancestral magic can heal up the wounds of that have been caused maybe in this lifetime with your uh, immediate family of origin, so your parents, your direct siblings, and so on. Can you talk to us a little bit about how that could help and why that would be a good thing?
Well, yeah, because who wants to go through life feeling like you hate your family and they hate you? I mean, I've said this before, so I apologize to anybody who's heard me before. But if you go back to the time of Queen Elizabeth I and William Shakespeare, okay,
Mm.
if you go back, it's like 500 years, more or less, you have over 1 million direct ancestors. That's moms and dads and moms and dads. It's not aunts, it's not uncles, it's not cousins. You have over 1 million, and that's only 500 years in the past. So
Wow.
you get a sense of how many ancestors you have in spirit who do love you. And let me say one other thing. Family patterns can be so incredibly destructive. and they may not start that way. So let me give you an example. Let's say you have the immigrant ancestor and they hit the shores of America with 25 cents in their pocket, which was not uncommon.
Yep.
So they are very frugal. So then their kids are get really frugal, even though they actually don't need to be, because generally the first, American generation just historically is very successful.
Mhm.
It's the doctors and the lawyers and the people who do well.
Yeah.
They don't need to have that frugality of the immigrant, but it's so inbred they do. And it gets worse with each generation. And
Mm.
so you may have family who just, oh no, you can't afford to go to college. We can't afford to pay for your
Mm.
wedding. Forget it. Even though they can. So using tarot and the pendulum again, I'll go back and try and find the generation where all this crap starts. And
Right.
and then because well, let me finish one thought before I pop to another one. If you do that, then you can start the healing that actually becomes generational healing. And
Yeah.
again, I use tarot pendulum, and I always ask for specifics, specifically, what is a step I can take to start the healing process? And it may be something really silly. So let's say that I know you're not a tarot person, but let's say you draw the Three of Swords, which shows a heart with three swords in it. Okay, so in real world, what does that mean? Are there people I need to forgive? Do I need to do some forgiveness work?
Hmm. Hmm.
So that's kind of how I start. Um, and of course, I did lose my train of thought to the second thought I had, but it will come back to me. Um, so I hope that answers your question. I think I went a long ways around.
No, I think it's great. And it is helpful, right? Because that pinpointing using these metaphysical techniques of pendulum,
Right.
tarot, all these things to pinpoint where did the problem start in my ancestral bloodline, right? Because there's only so much we can do with ourselves, identify, okay, I do this thing, or this repeat pattern keeps happening in my own personal life, but to heal it in the ancestral plane and going way back to find it, to do the digging in that plane and go, okay, I'm going to identify this and I'm going to work whatever I can do in my life that is going to have a ripple effect
Yeah,
backwards.
exactly. And I actually did pick up the train of thought based on what you said. So if you do tarot has four suits. They're the elemental suits. Um, I've done like family trees with tarot.
Hmm.
And I'll just use swords as an example because they're the mind. So I look at this family tree, swords, 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 swords. It's like people who live in their heads, really
Yes.
smart. And all of a sudden there's a cup card, the emotional person. Okay, what happened? What happened that all those head people, all of a sudden this cup person came in?
Hmm.
Something flipped in that generation, because
Right.
then we stop seeing the swords and we start seeing the cups and the other suits. So you can see the generation, there's a
Right.
flip. And
Wow.
and that is, oh my God, it's so fascinating because I'm a researcher. I will go say, okay, I'll just use Kentucky as an example. I don't know anything about Kentucky. Okay, in Kentucky in 1750, what was going on then? So I'll start trying to figure out what was going
Right.
on just in the world. So that's kind of my process.
That's awesome. And I have to say that the Ancestral Tarot book is really great because if you are, especially if you're not familiar with tarot, it's like got worksheets and how to
Yeah,
do certain spreads and stuff. Like and everything is really laid out and explained well to use tarot as a tool for
right,
this type of work, right? So even
right.
if you even if you do read tarot for other purposes, the way you have it laid out here, anybody could do it, whether they're familiar or not, because you've laid it out so well and
Well,
made
thank
these
you.
kind of like work pages. And I love in the back, I was just looking before it, you've got these places where you can chart everything. And it's really comprehensive is the word that I'm
Well,
looking
thank you.
for.
I
It's
appreciate that.
it's really comprehensive. So how does the new book which comes out in September. So by the time this airs, it should be out. So
Yeah.
excited.
I'm
So
so
everybody
excited
can
too.
buy it, buy it, buy it, buy it. How is that new book, the Ancestral Grimoire, how is that different from this book?
Oh, it's, Ancestral Tarot helps you tap in with the ancestors, and it helps you learn how to communicate with them.
Mhm.
Ancestral Grimoire, I really I went off in the wild blue with this because I truly believe that we all of us who are drawn to magic have magic in our bloodline. I totally believe that. Otherwise, what the hell are we doing here? You know,
Mhm.
we have certain skills. For you, it's in the kitchen. Okay. For me, it's astronomy and the stars because
Mm.
I am so drawn to star legends, star people. I co-authored 2 books on astronomy, and
Mhm.
I'm not talking astrology, I'm talking
It's
telescope.
like actual, like the
Yeah,
science
the
of
science of it.
stars and planets and yeah.
Right, and so I'm super drawn to the cosmos, and I know that a lot of my healing magic comes through the stars,
Yeah.
okay? So, there's introductory chapters, and then there are January through December, each month is a different type of magic that, you may identify with it, you may not,
Yeah.
because, some of it is magic of working with place, some of it's working with weather. I mean, I've some of it's working with where did you have ancestors who were magical enough to help plot out the Stonehenges of the world? Or so,
Wow.
but and again, you're gonna identify with some of it, but not all of it. But I just want people to understand they didn't just get plopped here in a void. They have this magic running through their blood. And if you don't know what it is, try these 12 things and find it.
Right.
And there are more than 12, just by the virtue of what I was writing, that was what came up.
Absolutely.
Um, yeah, but
But
go looking.
what do you hope with the Ancestral Grimoire? What do you hope people walk away with? What's your like if you could pinpoint somebody reads that book and uses that book, what would you hope that they would take away from it?
I would really hope that they understand they have a power that no one else on this planet has. Because if you do the exercises in Ancestral Grimoire, you are going to end up with a book of family magic. And it will be like no one else's on the planet because it's your bloodline. That's it. It's yours. It's totally unique to you. Doesn't matter if you have somebody born exactly the same day in the same family, they're going to be different books. So that's what I hope is that you understand how powerful you are.
Wow. Wow, that is fantastic. I feel like I had a bunch of questions that I was going to ask you, and I feel like we covered all of them. Like, I have like a little cheat sheet, but that blows my mind because you're talking about finding yourself
Yes.
as a magical being, as a powerful human being by looking at, and again, to bring it back to the where we started this conversation, by bringing it back to where we came from, right?
Exactly.
And going as far back as you can and deep understanding of the magic within you and the humanity within you and those life experiences and all those amazing connections of other human beings
Yeah.
that put you here now.
Yeah, exactly. And I hope that I hope men read it as well, because I have a lot of men friends in the community. I hope they embrace it as much as women, but I really hope women, we live in a culture that undervalues women, and that's just reality. And I would hope a young woman could read that, have her family grimoire, her book of secrets, and understand the power she has in this world and stop listening to all of the voices saying, I'm not thin enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have enough money. It's just bullshit.
It
It
is
is total bullshit.
bullshit. It
Yeah.
is total bullshit. And I think back to what you were talking about before is that most people, clients or people that you deal with, that you do healing sessions or you do tarot sessions for, come from a background where the family, that nuclear family of origin, um, might be the first messages of "you're not good enough, you're not pretty enough,
Right,
you're not this,"
exactly.
right? Those are those first messages. So being able to kind of like skip past them and find and connect with the
Absolutely.
the healing that can come from that, quite frankly, Nancy, is something I never thought of. It's not something, because it's not a world that I work in. It is not something that I've ever thought of. And I'm sitting here going, oh my goodness, this could be that answer to that healing, and going, why can't I fix, 15 years of therapy? Why can't I fix my
Yeah,
relationships? Why can't and is it possible that in this plane, in this realm, we've gone as far as we could go, and now it's time to go to the ancestral plane and talk to them and
absolutely.
bring them in.
Absolutely. And I will tell you, you have inspired me to pull out some family recipes and get in the kitchen.
Yeah. All right. We're coming up on, again, as we're recording this, we're coming up on Mother's Day. And my grandmother, who was talking about, she also passed away around Mother's Day. I can't remember the exact date, but when she passed, it was like the week of Mother's
Yeah.
Day, many years ago. And I just said to my partner the other day, I was like, I don't know, grandma's talking. I'm gonna have to make meatballs. I'm just gonna have to make meatballs, because meatballs are a big deal. They're an all day process, and I really only make meatballs like 2 or 3 times a year when I feel
Wow.
called, when I need her around, or I feel her around, and I'm like, it's gonna happen, it's gonna happen. So I bought everything I need, put everything in the freezer, so that when I have a moment, and she will just keep talking, like, you got to get those meatballs, you got to, I mean, it's very powerful when you let them in.
Powerful. It is powerful. And make sure the ingredients are all good.
Oh, all good ingredients in here, all
Yeah,
good ingredients in here. I love it. Thank you for remembering that.
you're welcome.
She would love that. Okay, so we're just about out of time. So before we wrap up, let's talk a little bit about where we can find you online. How do we buy your amazing books? How do
Okay.
we follow you? Tell everybody.
Okay. So I am most active on Instagram, and my handle is Nancy Sage Shadow.
Nancy Sage
Sage
Shadow.
Shadow. And my website is sageandshadow.com.
Okay.
So those are the two places you can find me most. And come over. My books are both on Amazon. Ancestral Grimoire is already up for pre-sale.
Yeah.
So yeah, go buy it.
Yeah,
And
buy it, because this
and
is some great shit right here.
oh, thank you. And you know what? I love working with people interactively. I am not a fortune teller. I am a healer tarot person. So that's how I make myself available to people is
Wonderful. So people could book a reading with you.
they can book a reading. I will not tell your fortune. I will interactively work with you to solve a problem. That's I want you to be healed. That's
And
my
and will you help, if someone was to book a reading with you, you can connect with ancestral magic, help them to
yes,
find, and pinpoint and maybe advise? Would that
yes,
be correct? Oh, it's awesome. It's awesome.
absolutely.
So Nancy Hendrickson, Ancestral Tarot is out right now. Ancestral Grimoire will be available by the time this podcast airs in September. Buy her books, do the workbook, do the exercises in the book, because they're really awesome. The exercises in here is very interactive, just like you said. She's got journal prompts, and it's like I just open a saying up and saying thank you and goodbye to spirits. Like, this is just, it's really comprehensive. And if I can do it, anybody can do it. So
Thank
before
you.
we go, and we'll have all of your links and everything
Okay.
on the show notes. We'll put them right there so everybody can just click and find you. But last question, and I ask this to every person that comes
Okay.
on the show. Obviously, I'm a kitchen witch and I cook, and that's my jam. If I was to cook something for you, a magical meal for you, what would it be and why?
Potato leek soup.
You didn't even think about it.
I
Potato leeks.
didn't. No, because I think it's because I am very much an earth sign. I'm very Virgo. and I have a lot of planets in Virgo, and leeks and potatoes are both, you know, under the ground, earthy
Super
things.
grounding. Yes.
Yeah, very grounding. I like food that's super grounding. So that's why I would want it. You could make potato leek soup and I'd be happy.
And I've made a potato soup. I had a couple of versions of a potato soup, but I've never made a potato leek soup.
Yeah.
That sounds divine. And I would serve it to you in a beautiful bread bowl.
Oh,
Like, I
thank you. That's perfect. That's exactly how you should.
feel like that's how you should have it.
It is, absolutely.
And it warms the bones, potato
It
leek
does.
soup, doesn't it? Yes.
Yes,
Oh, I
totally.
love it. I love it. Well, Nancy, thank you so much for spending
Oh,
time with me
Dawn, thank you
today.
so much. This has been great. I have loved doing this with you. Thank
Oh,
you.
thank you. I'm so happy to have you. And I always feel like this podcast is just giving me an excuse to make friends. So
Yeah, exactly.
I am so grateful. Everyone, go find Nancy Hendrickson on Instagram. Go check out her website, buy her books, connect with your ancestors. Amazing, amazing. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you
Oh,
so
thank
much.
you.
And until next time, everyone, I wish you many blessings and so much gratitude. See you next time.